Kick off summer with Memorial Day savings at Lowe's. Right now, get 5 Scott's Naturescapes 1.5 cubic foot mulch bags for just $10. Plus, get up to 40% off select major appliances and save an extra $50 on every $500 you spend on select major appliances $396 or more. Lowe's, we help, you save. Valid through 5/28. Mulch offer excludes Alaska and Hawaii. Selection varies by location. While supplies last. See Lowe's.com for more details.
Blog Talk Radio.
The following broadcast is brought to you by the iGolf Sports Network.
Golf Talk Live is sponsored by the iGolf Sports Network and Golf Tips Magazine. Here's Andrew to tell you more about our sponsors.
iGolf Sports is a live stream broadcast and media production company providing quality programming designed to attract the golfing enthusiast. And Golf Tips, the game's most in-depth instruction magazine, including reviews on the latest equipment, tips from top teaching professionals, all designed to help you improve from tee to green. Welcome to Golf Talk Live with your host, Ted Odorico. Join Ted each week as he speaks with some of the best in golf. This week's special guest will join us a bit later. But first up is another great discussion on Coach's Corner. So let's introduce tonight's Coach's Corner panel.
All right, good evening, everybody, and once again, welcome to Golf Talk Live. I'm your host, of course, Ted Odorico, and I'm glad you could join us live this evening, this Thursday evening, August 19th. It's hard to believe that we're another month is slowly coming to an end here in just another week and a half, I guess. But I appreciate you guys joining live. For those of you, obviously, that are going to hear this a little bit later, just to remind everybody, we are live every Thursdays from 6 to 8 p.m. Central here on the blogtalkradio.com network. And, of course, you can go to blogtalkradio.com/Golf Talk Live and tune in either live, or you can go down and scroll down the page to the on-demand section, and you'll see all the previously aired shows there in their entirety, so you can listen to it when it's convenient for you. But for those of you tuning into live tonight, thank you very much, as always. And we've got a great show for you tonight. Going to introduce the Coach's Corner panel, as it mentioned in the opening, here in just a second. And then a little bit later on, I'm going to be joined once again by my very special guest, Wes Whittingham. He's the Vice President of Sales for Volvik USA. He's going to be joining me talking about some of the new stuff that they got cooking over at Volvik. So we'll talk to him a little bit later on. All right, tonight on the panel, first up is John Decker. He's the Director of Instruction at the Medallion Club in Columbus, Ohio. He's also a Senior Editor at Top 25 Instructor at Golf Tips Magazine. He was prior to that, he was a head instructor previously at the Grand Cypress Academy of Golf in Orlando, and he was the 2015 Southern Ohio PGA Teacher of the Year. He's also author of Golf is My Life, Glorifying God Through the Game, which, of course, includes a Bible study, and he's also a public speaker. Also joining the panel from way across the pond, as they say, is my good friend Jamie Leno-Zimron. She is a Class A LPGA teacher professional, a 6th-degree Aikido black belt. She's also a somatic psychologist, corporate speaker, and mind-body fitness trainer. She also graduated Phi Beta Kappa from Stanford University, and she's the creator of the Ki Golf, the Centered Way. So, Jamie and John, welcome to Coach's Corner here on Golf Talk Live.
Thank you, Ted.
Thank you, Ted. It's always wonderful to be with you, and happy to be with John, too. Thank you.
All right. Well, I appreciate it. All right. We're going to talk about this is something – there's actually two things we're going to talk about tonight. The first one is something that actually – I talked about a little bit earlier this week on the other show, Women of Golf, with my good friend Cindy Miller. But I thought this would be a good discussion to have on the Coach's Corner panel tonight, and that is some ways to break 90 consistently. Everybody's trying to, break 100, trying to break 90, 80, what have you. But 90 seems to be a tough one for a lot of people. And I've got together some thoughts here, and I want to get to the panel's input as well. Because I think this is an area that a lot of people, maybe they're in that category of between 90 and 100, and they're consistently hitting the ball in that number, and they're trying to get below that 90 range into the 80s, which is what the high handicappers try to strive through. So we're going to talk about that, and put together the 5 shots you need. The first one is John, I'm going to start with you, and maybe you can expand on this a little bit more, but let me just sort of lay it out, and then we'll get into the discussion. The first one is, I believe, is you need to pick a club, obviously, that goes straight at least 160 yards or more off the tee. We'll use this club off the tee every single hole except for par threes when we might need another club. The 160 yards is the minimum, but essentially what you want is the longest club you can hit straight. And there's a reason for that, and John, you're going to explain that in a moment. So you want to select a club. I'm just going to lay this out for you. In your bag that you feel most comfortable with, that you can hit 160 more yards or more yards. The longer, of course, again, the better. And that can be a combination of fairway wood. Maybe it's a hybrid for you. It might be your driver or a 5-iron. So, John, there's a reason why I picked this, and I want to get your thoughts on this as well, because I think a lot of people are very quick to pull out their driver. They're spraying it all over the golf course. Really what we want to do, if we want to get people consistently breaking 90, we've got to keep them in the fairway as much as possible, and I think this is a way to do it. What are your thoughts here, and maybe you can add to it as well?
Well, first of all, thank you, Ted, for having me on the show, and Jamie, I look forward to being on with you as well tonight. That's a great point that you just brought up, Ted. It's important that you be able to get the ball in play. I always tell my students the number one objective to a tee shot on a par 4 or par 5 is getting the ball in play. That is our number one objective. And I think it's important to have a go-to club, a club that you know that you can get in play, whether it be a hybrid, whether it be a fairway wood, or maybe you have two go-to clubs. But depending on the situation, it doesn't always have to be the driver. So a lot of times, obviously, people who are swinging or shooting in the 90s and trying to get into the 80s most likely are going to have some swing flaws, which is only going to get magnified as you go to the driver. And the most common of these is the slice or the shot to the right. That would be probably, that fits, I would say 75% of the people in that, 60 to 75% of the people in that category. So if you go to a driver and you've got a driver with 10 or 11 degrees or 12 degrees of loft on it, and you're slicing it, it's going to be a lot easier if you can go to a hybrid or to a fairway wood and get the ball in play. And so not only do you want to have a go-to club that you can hit off the tee, but also hopefully use that off the fairway as well. And the 5-iron, I don't recommend a 5-iron for anyone who's shooting their scores are in the 90s or and really even in the 80s. I recommend a 5 hybrid. I think that I think the longest iron that the average golfer should have in their bag is a 6-iron. Because remember, the manufacturers now are making these clubs stronger and longer, and so the 5-iron is the 4-iron or even a 3-iron from 20 or 30 plus years ago, depending on the loft. Some of these irons I see are really strong, and so I don't recommend. I recommend the 5 hybrid over the 5-iron in that scenario, but it's a great point, Ted, because you do have to get the ball in play, and you have to have confidence because so much of this is, what I call your plan B club. So if you're not hitting the driver well or you get up on a hole and there's a lot of trouble, you have a club that you can go to, that you know that you can get into play, and having that confidence, you're going to have a much more aggressive swing if you're confident in what you're doing.
Great point. And, Jamie, I'm going to get your thoughts on here, too, and I just want to add to it. Obviously, as John pointed out, and as I initially said, your goal really here is to hit fairways off the tee because really we're looking for bogeys here. I mean, at the worst-case scenario, there's no need to hit the ball as far as possible necessarily every time. We just need to be able to hit those fairways with a decent enough distance to clear, maybe there's some rough before we get to the fairway. With this tactic, again, we'll maybe typically make more bogeys along the way, but maybe a few pars as well. And this is a club that, again, depending on what you choose, it's reliable. It's a reliable shot shape for you, and it's something that you could hit probably 90, 95% of the time you're going to get it in the fairway. What are your thoughts here? Maybe you might have some different suggestions. I think having a go-to club like this that you're going to get at least 150, even 160 yards and keep it in the fairway, I think is a good way to start off in helping to break 90. What do you think?
Well, I very much agree that, getting the ball on the fairway off the tee, getting in play, and really in the fairway is important because, you're playing at catch-up the whole hole when you start out in the rough or, in trouble. So, you've really got to lean on a short game, which is another part I'm sure we'll get to, in the course of this hour. But, yeah, getting off to a good start in the middle is super important. Having a club that you feel confident with. As John said, so, you can play aggressively, you can make a good swing and get the distance you need as well. I also agree that for most players, especially in this range, having a 5-iron hybrid, having your irons start maybe at 6-iron is a good idea. Hybrids are just a lot easier to hit and to hit the sweet spot. So I'm just going to take this in the direction a little bit more of the sweet spot because the sweet spot is really about making centered contact. And when you make centered contact, you tend to hit the center of the fairway a lot more often. When we're hitting the ball off the heel, off the toe, that's when the ball is going to be hooking, slicing, going here, going there, and you're going to miss the fairway. So, Ted, what I teach a lot is centered golfing, right? Ki golf, centered golf. And the basic idea here is that we need to make centered contact, hit that sweet spot of the club. That's when all the energy goes in the ball the way it's supposed to. We get the optimal distance and direction. And the idea is that when we're centered, when we're in balance, from setup to our backswing, impact position, clearly square centered contact, and balance follow through, we are going to tend to hit the ball straighter more often and make more consistent contact. So the idea is centered plus centered equals centered. And most people tend to make centered contact really very much on a random basis. That's because they're lifting, they're swaying, they're falling off the ball, they're trying to kill it, hitting it so hard, they're falling back off their balance. And it's just so important to be in balance and be centered throughout the swing because centered plus centered is going to equal centered contact. That's when we're going to be in the fairway and be able to, as you say, we're looking for bogeys here, right? And that means you don't always have to be on the green in what we would call regulation, right? Regulation would really be, say, 3 shots on a par 4, 4 shots on a par 5. If you bogeyed every hole, you would shoot 90. And so that's another thing maybe we can talk about is kind of the mindset when we start looking at par as bogey. Because then you're going to be able to shoot 86 is going to be, say, 4 under, which is, I don't think most golfers should be comparing themselves to tour pros. I think that's where we kind of put ourselves also behind the 8 ball right from the start mentally.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and some great additional points there as well. Jamie, take a deep breath because I'm coming right back to you. I'm going to let you pick on the next topic here. I'm going to let you start off here, and that's really you talked about the short game here, a solid pitching game inside 70 yards. This is point number 2 to really helping to break 90. So I'm going to lay it out a little bit, and I'm going to let you add your thoughts in here. So we're sort of trying to avoid really those 30 to 70-yard pitch shots in the course as much as we can because they're kind of an in-between shot, but inevitably they're going to happen. You're going to be faced with that distance or somewhere in those distance. So it's really, I think, best to learn to be able to play them because they'll save you 3 or 4 easily more shots per round. So selection of the club that you prefer to use in that range is really up to you. It could be a lob wedge, a gap wedge, sand wedge, or even a pitching wedge, whatever you perform best with. I think is best. And Dave Pell's in his short game schools has always talked about using sort of the clock-based system where however far he takes it back, so if he's taking it back, if you're assuming that the clock is up, your head is 12 o'clock, he's going to, in the backswing, he's going to take it, let's say, to 4 o'clock, and then he's going to go through to 8 o'clock, the same equal distance. I want to get your thoughts on this, Jamie, because this is an area, again, these real short pitch shots. It's not a full pitch shot. It's a short pitch shot and kind of in between that 30 to 70 range. That's an area that you're inevitably, as I said, going to get faced with, and we really need to be able to dial into that. Maybe you can offer some tips on how people can hand that and your thoughts on maybe selecting a specific club to use and get comfortable with consistently. What are your thoughts?
I really like your phrase, the pitching game, Ted, because we think a lot about short game, and a lot of times that means chipping. But the pitching game, as you're saying, from, say, 70 yards in, for lower handicap golfers, we tend to focus on 100 yards in. But I think it's absolutely right for, not necessarily the lower handicappers to think about 70 yards in, 70 and under. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad yardage at all. And finding a club that works for you, whether that's what we used to call a sand wedge or a pitching wedge, a gap wedge, whatever that is. And some people prefer to hit kind of a lower shot that will bounce up on the green, and other people like to fly it. I think it's really worthwhile to learn how to make fly a shot onto the green with a wedge that you're comfortable with. So that's what I would recommend, and really working on that, because the pitching game, being able to get on the green from, you say 70 yards in or less, and that's that kind of bogey regulation, shall we say. And it's important to be able to get on the green and get reasonably close to the pin so that you can at least two-putt and maybe sink your putt for par, which in a certain sense would be a birdie if we're playing bogey golf, and that's 90, shooting 90. So this is a very, very important shot. I wanted to say something about the clock image, and I definitely agree with matching up the backswing and the forward swing. But sometimes the clock doesn't work, that image. It all depends. For me, it turns out it didn't work. It doesn't work so well. My mind just, it doesn't get it. But my mind,
right.
And just to offer this to people who maybe have a little trouble with that visualization, I love to use my body. So I may take the club back ankle height to ankle height, or mid-calf to mid-calf, knee to knee height, mid-thigh to mid-thigh, hip to hip, shoulder to shoulder, or, so you see what I'm saying here? You can really use your body to kind of measure out, meter that out. It's the same. It comes out the same, and the principle is the same, but that may be a little more, easier, especially for sort of sensate learners more than visual learners. But the idea, and I like to teach this to my students, is that every good shot adds up to 100. And what that means is that even back, even through, even 50-50. I like to think more about 45 back, 55 through. That means there's an acceleration on the way through, and that could be for a chip or a putt, a chip, a pitch shot, doesn't matter. But if you think about it, sometimes we'll take the club back, 80, and then we go, oh, no, that's too much, and completely decel. And then we go down to 40. Well, first of all, it's 120. But it's 80-40, or we'll take it back 30 and go, oh, that's not enough. And this all happens kind of subconsciously. So we take back 30 or 40 and go, oh, man, I really got to come through. And then next thing you know, when you come through at 90, well, you got 130, right? Or you've got 90, 70s. It's like 100. It's crazy what people do. So it's really nice to start to practice metering that out at about a 45, 55 back, 45 back or 48 back, 52 through, but have every good shot add up to 100 with a good ratio.
Yeah, that's a great point, and you're right. I mean,
and then
obviously,
and then also let the club do the work. I would just say let the club, and the loft of the club, it's built in on a wedge, for example, so that the ball will automatically roll up the club face and pop up into the air. And that's a shot that I think everybody needs, that kind of a pitch shot.
I couldn't agree more. Great analogy. John, I'm gonna skip over this for you because I think Jamie's pretty much laid it out for that, and I've got something a little bit different in mind for you, and that's the next shot, if you will, or step, if you want to call it that. Number 3 is really to pick your 2 favorite clubs from inside 150 yards. So what you want to do here is you want to find 2 clubs that you know you can hit on the green from 150 yards or less. Just 2 of them, and the choice is really up to the individual golfer, whatever you like most. So as an example, yours might be a pitching wedge where it's 120 to 130 yards, and your gap wedge, which is 105 to 115 yards. It may be longer, maybe shorter. You may have different clubs. You're going to use these 2 clubs really for a final approach to the green. So, for instance, you might have 240 yards to the green after you've hit that 160-yard plus shot off the tee to get you in the fairway. Well, you're not going to likely get that most people are not going to be able to reach that especially if they're having difficulties breaking 90 to begin with. So what you want to do now is you can break those distances into 2 shots. So you can break that 240 into 2 shots. So having 2 clubs to really make things solidified within that 150-yard range is really going to help you out. Maybe you can add a little bit to that. Maybe you can expand a little bit. What are your thoughts here about doing that as well? I think this is an important step.
I do. It's a great point, Ted, especially if you don't find the fairway. If you're in the rough off the tee, whether it's a fairway bunker or in the rough, and you're not in the fairway, even a really good player, a scratch golfer or college player, high school players that I work with, I'm always stressing to them, let's break this down into 2 shots, and let's break this down into where we're leaving ourselves on the second shot, our go-to yardage, the go-to yardage that you have practiced on the driving range. And the key to this is you must practice on the driving range. You must have a yardage. Like when I was growing up, I loved 100 yards. That was my favorite yardage, and I practiced it all the time. I would go down to our practice football field at our high school. I didn't have a driving range, so my PE coach let me go down there, and I would hit balls on the practice driving range. And I got so good at 100 yards that if I was on a par 5 and I couldn't, and it was, I was thinking about going for it in 2, but there was some water up there, I said, you know what, I'm going to lay it up to 100. I love that yardage, and that was my go-to yardage. So for the average golfer, and even the tour players, they have their go-to yardages with their wedges. So the average golfer needs to think of, like Jamie was saying earlier, on a par 4 for the average golfer, a green in regulation for them is not 2 shots, it's 3 shots. So assuming we've got a drive out there that we can advance the ball down the fairway, you need to look at the yardage, and you need to break that down into 2. So in the illustration that I was just saying, let's say that you hit a nice tee shot, but you're still 200 yards away. So then what you do is you take out that 100-yard club, whether it's your 9-iron, your pitching wedge, your 8-iron. I always say I don't care what club it is. All I care is the fact that you can hit it that distance every time. And now you are 200 yards away. So in theory, if you hit that shot twice, you should be on the green, and you should be in a position to where you have an opportunity, to make a par. And in your case, and for the average golfer, if they 2-putt, that is their par. So it's not a 1-putt par. It would be 2-putt, make your bogey. But if you're trying to break 90, that's going to go a long way. Bogeys are going to go a long way if you're trying to break 90 in getting you to reach your goal. And then obviously the lower you get as a player, the more you have to fine tune that, and it just gets more and more difficult. But it's so much of breaking that barrier of 90 is the mental aspect that par is not. If it says par 4 for the average golfer, it's going to be actually a par 5 or even a par 6, depending on how high your handicap is.
Yeah, exactly, and a great way to sort of split that up, and that's really the idea. Is it all becomes, and we'll talk about this here in a little bit, but more becomes strategy, Jamie, than anything else out in the golf course. I think too many people are too quick to pull out a club thinking I've got to get it way down there, I've got to hit it as far as I can, and a lot of times they can still achieve the goal they want to get by just playing smarter. Step number 4 or shot number 4 is obviously having, a consistent 2-putt and a solid short putt. So as we know, Jamie, 3 putts are score killers, and I think everyone with a little practice can, at the very worst case scenario, 2-putt every hole. It's just a matter of some practice. So hitting the practice green after work or once or twice a week for maybe 20, 30 minutes to an hour for some that are really diligent are certainly going to help your score drop. What can we do? What are some ideas or some suggestions that you can think of to reduce that? Because we see so many players getting on these greens and they're 3-putting, some cases even 4-putting on a regular basis. They might get there in 2 shots or even 3 shots to the green, but all of a sudden it falls, by the wayside. What can we do to be consistent 2-putt and definitely work on a solid short putt? Jamie, your thoughts?
Well, the good news is that everybody can putt, right? It's not a question of strength. It's not a question of age or size. We can all learn to be good putters, decent putters, two putters, one putters, yeah, and to avoid three putts. First of all, I think it's, as you said, appreciating that three putts are score killers, and that we really need two things to make more two putts. Number one is to get the ball on the green in a closer range. Yeah, you can't be looking at 40, 50 footers all the time. And then the other is to practice the short putts, so that short putts mean anything from the 2 and 3, 4 footers, so that we can feel confident in sinking those, and up to 10, 15 feet, so that there are some one putts that people can make. So what can we say? You got to practice, yeah. I'm a martial artist, and I look at everything as practice, or what we call training in the martial arts. And anybody will tell you, no matter what it is, whether it's in the arts, whether it's in business and speaking, in golfing, in any sport, you really can't get away from the need to practice. Now, a lot of people don't necessarily take that attitude and haven't learned how to enjoy practicing. So I think it's important to make practice interesting and fun. You can play games, with short game, chips and putting. You can play games with yourself or with a friend, a family member, and, chip the ball on the green, and then practice putting and make those little competitive games. So I just think if you can make practice fun, and also with putting is so easy to practice at home. And, we've been here in the pandemic. The idea is to really work on the smoothness and the evenness of the stroke. That's where you start to get consistency. And what I mean is what we were just talking about, back and through at an even pace, so that the putting stroke starts to become more like butter, right? Every good putter on tour will talk about the smoothness of their stroke. And that's just so important. And that comes about through consistent practice. First of all, you get centered. And I talk about with putting, use your shoes, yeah? Take the putter this far back outside the back foot shoe, and this far forward and in front of the front foot shoe. When you start to meter that out from a place of center, now the stroke starts to gain some consistency. And I think it's important for people to understand that that there's two important factors in putting and throughout golf, which is D&D, distance and direction. And so in putting, it's about keeping the putter face square through contact and not letting your wrist break, your body move, your knees move, your head move. So it's getting that stillness. You can practice that at home, and then metering out the stroke. Those things really, really help. And of course, you always want to have a target. That could be just the leg of a chair or your couch if you're at home practicing. And of course, when you're practicing on a putting green is the greatest thing. And to go to a practice green doesn't cost you a lot of money. Bring your own golf balls and just get out there and practice and make it fun.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
It's about that's the fluidity, the consistency of the stroke. And understanding that the distance that a ball rolls in a putt is not about, quote, how far you hit it. It's about the size of your stroke. So longer back, longer through makes for more distance. And so when you get your stroke matched up with the speed of the green, then you start to have some control over your distance. Now you're getting control on your lag putts, and you're getting your shorter putts right there into the hole better.
Yep, great point. And I couldn't agree more. I think a lot of people really sort of tend to stab at the golf ball when they get on the putting surface instead of having a nice, fluid, smooth stroke. John, on this one here, step number 5 or shot number 5 deals with one area we haven't talked about yet, and that is, of course, chipping. And, I recommend for a lot of golfers, some people may have a different approach to this, but picking one club to chip around the greens with. Select that club that you like to bump and run chip with, but you want to be consistently getting onto the green and get it to roll up to the hole. Too many, especially high handicappers, they see the pros on TV, John hitting those flop shots or the lob shot. Very, very difficult and very inconsistent. Even some of the best players in the world, even though they're certainly much more consistent than the majority out there. But if you're trying to break 90, the last thing you want to be doing is sculling or fluffing too many of these. So I like to pick, and I recommend this. What are your thoughts here about maybe picking? It might be a pitching wedge. It could be a 9-iron, 8-iron, whatever you're comfortable with. What are your thoughts here about getting our high handicappers to maybe just dial in on one club that they can chip anywhere around the green with and be somewhat consistent each time?
Well, Ted, as far as the chipping goes, I think it is the most under-taught and under-practiced shot that I see in golf. It's almost a lost art. A lot of it has to do with the way golf courses now are being built in America. But golf was originally designed to be played on the ground, and keeping the ball lower on the ground and running the ball is much easier than trying to flop the ball up in the air. It's just, I don't care. I've never seen anyone try to flop it from the green. When you're on the green, they want to roll it. So if you're just off the green, why put the ball in the air? You would want to go with a shot that's lower. And learning to use different clubs. Now, I learned under Phil Rogers, and I will disagree a little bit. I'm not a big proponent of just using one club because that means you have to change your swing. I would rather change a club and not change my swing. So, for example, if I have a longer chip shot, I'm going to use a 6 or 7 iron. When I say longer, maybe my ball is maybe a couple of yards off the green and I have 40 or 50 or 60 feet of green to work with. That's where I'm going to go to some sort of 6-iron, 7-iron, 8-iron, depending on whether I'm going uphill or downhill. If I have a shorter or a medium-sized chip, so let's say I'm about 25 or 30 feet from the green, from the pin, and I'm just right off the edge of the green, then I'm going to tend to go with maybe a 7-iron, 8-iron, 9-iron. And then if I'm closer, my ball is right off the edge of the green, and I've got maybe anywhere from 10 to 15 feet of green to work with, then I'm going with a pitching wedge. But what I do is, so I've got kind of the short, the medium, and the long. I have a locked-in stroke. I basically take my 6-iron, 7-iron, whatever, pitching wedge, and I hold it like a putter, and I stand very close to the ball, and it's a very small up and down putting motion. I lean into my left side, feet are close together, lean into my left side, and make a putting motion. The ball is only in the air for a couple of feet, and when it hits the green, it rolls like a putt. And so once you have the swing locked in, then you just decide, what club are you going to use? On a longer shot, you're going to use a 6 or 7 iron, medium, 8 or 9, shorter pitching wedge. That's the same thing that we all do in golf anyway. If I'm farther from the green, I go with a longer club. If I'm shorter or closer to the green, I go with a more lofty club. So the concept, of not being able to use different clubs, I think even for someone trying to break 90, I encourage you to do this. And again, it goes back to what Jamie and I have been saying, earlier, is you got to practice this stuff. I mean, you can't just go out on the golf course and say, well, John said last night to use a 7-iron from, 60 feet, and you're liable to knock that thing over the green and probably, get yourself in trouble. So you got to at least practice this. So I don't want the viewers, calling in and complaining that I gave them, bad advice. So all of this advice has to be practiced. So it's important that you get a feel for it. But it's really a shot. We used to, when I was working at Grand Cypress, we had this shot in every one of our golf schools. And of all the shots, it was the one the students all of them were able to do with just a little bit of practice. It doesn't take a lot of effort. And it's just like putting. It's just putting with loft. Raymond Floyd described it as chipping as putting with a lofty club.
I agree with you, John. I mean, I personally, I do the same thing. I think when I teach is I do have them use different clubs. The reason why I took this approach for tonight's discussion is I think, though, sometimes, again, our higher handicappers, golfers that have a difficult time breaking 90, typically are not very consistent. So what I like to do is to get them at least comfortable with one club first and work up to the others. And the reason I agree with you, I mean, I typically might start them off with the pitching wedge, and then I'll show them how to de-loft it a little bit to get a similar reaction to those mid and longer hits as well, so that they're not, hitting it, popping it up in the air. But I do agree with you. I think using multiple clubs, I just find that with our higher handicap players, until they're really comfortable with developing a good solid stroke that they can use and just change out clubs, I sometimes will default to a single club selection initially for a little while until they get comfortable with that, and then I'll work them into the others as well. But I do agree with you. I think that is a much more sound way to develop that. I just think for some of the more challenged golfers, sometimes with just one club makes it a little bit easier and gets them in a comfort level, and then we can work from there. But I do agree with you overall. So really what we want to do is, with what we've been talking about here is really now to take on the various holes. So with our par threes, as I mentioned, these holes are certainly reachable in one shot if you're playing off the correct tees, of course. That's first and foremost. And you should look at to be on or near the green on par threes. Be happy with bogeys here and be sure to get on the green in one or a maximum two shots. On some of the longer par threes, I would recommend look for a safe bailout area where if you miss, you'll have an easy chip onto the green, and then obviously, go from there. And again, don't be a hero and go for the green if you can't reach. A bogey is not a bad score. Again, we're just trying to break 90 at this point. Par fours, it's the same thing. Again, you're more of a target. You want to hitting the green in two shots. So as an example, if it's a very short par four, only 300 to 350 yards, you can hit it, again, using some of our analogies that we talked about earlier. You can hit that 160-yard shot off the tee and then break it down into your other shots just to get in. Same thing with the longer par four where it's maybe 450 yards. So again, the idea is what you want to do is you want to be able to develop a system that allows you to play, whether it's a par three, par four, or par five, consistently keeping the ball in play. Too many people, as we've talked about here tonight, go the opposite route, and they're trying to hit it as far as they can down the fairway, not really worrying about where it's going, trying to muscle it down there, and then they get into a myriad of problems. So these are just some guides that people can use. I truly believe if you follow the steps that we talked about tonight, you're going to be able to see some notable improvement, and you're going to get down to that breaking that 90. And then once you do that, this is what I wanted to talk about. I said there were two things we're going to talk about. Here's I want to get each of your thoughts. I believe, Jamie, it's your turn. Now we've broken 90 consistently. We're somewhere in the 80s. The next big hurdle is breaking 80, and that's a whole different beast. We can certainly apply some of the things that we've talked about here, but what does it really take? This, I think, becomes more the mind game now than so much the physical game. What are your thoughts here when it comes to breaking 80? What do we got to do?
I'm going to get to that in a minute. I'm just going to back up for a second. On the subject of what clubs to use, I was going back to being a kid, and some of you may remember, all we had was a 3, 5, 7, 9 iron and a sand wedge. You guys remember that? Mm-hmm. And we didn't have a 4, 6, 8 iron and all these, 56s and 60s and all that. We just had those basic clubs. And with those basic clubs, I remember learning how to, as you say, kind of add loft, de-loft a club, a 9 iron, a sand wedge, and my 7 iron, and all the shots that were needed. Sometimes I think my short game was better when I was a kid. Number one, I was more fearless. Number two, I got a little bit crafty with just those clubs. You know what I mean? So I think it's not such a bad idea to think back on that and to get skilled in those basic kinds of skills with a few clubs that we feel really confident with around the greens. And I did just want to say, in terms of breaking 90, I think that it's very important for people to change their mindset, as we're talking about, and have a strategy where they're thinking of bogey as par, because that comes out to 90 exactly, and it's par 72. And that way you give yourself more birdie opportunities, which I think is very, very helpful mentally, because it gives you a big boost. It's like, wow, I made a birdie. And if you get a double bogey, it's only a bogey. It's not the end of the world. And it's also thinking of regulation differently, as you were saying. It's even 2 on a par 3 or 3 on a par 4, 4 on a par 5, plus 2 putts. So that change in mindset, a lot of people have trouble making that change because they think somehow, I don't know, that it's less or whatever. But it makes a lot of sense, because I don't know the exact numbers of people who don't even break 100, much less break 90. So I think we need to make that mindset shift. In terms of, getting down to breaking 80, that is a really big barrier. I mean, I think when anybody shoots in the 70s, 78 or 79, breaking 80 is just an amazing, it's like an Olympian feat, right? It feels incredible when you break 80 for the first time, or if you start breaking it consistently, it is something tremendous. So I think at that level, we are talking about people having more shots in the bag that they're comfortable with. So, for example, short game, as John was talking about, being able to have that sort of putt chip from just right around off the green or on the fringe, being able to have a chip shot from 10, 20 yards off the green, and to short pins, medium pins, long pins, and also having the pitch shot or the more lob kind of shot that goes up in the air. So I think that it's essential that people at that level have all those shots in the bag and have a consistent ability to hit the green from 150 yards in, and certainly from 100 yards in. Be able to make some one putts to get up and down is really, really important, because, you're going to have to save some of the times, save yourself when you do miss a green, when you're not on in regulation. So I think those are some things that are really very, very important, and consistency is huge in terms of being able to break 80. I think it's also a mindset thing. Oddly enough, we always think about how tough it is on us mentally when we start doing badly. But I think we all know that when we start doing really well, we almost freak ourselves out and we get nervous, and you're thinking ahead, and you're like, can I keep it up, and all that kind of thing. So, we get just as nervous when we're doing really well as when we're doing really badly. So I think it's like, it's a lot about, in a certain sense, working on your ability to stay or to shift yourself into your sympathetic nervous system, meaning to be playing in that place of calm and balance and center is absolutely essential to be able to break 80.
I couldn't agree more. And John, as Jamie said, again, it's a different mindset that we're getting into, and a lot of folks, even when they start to do well, get very, very nervous, especially if they're not used to it. And sometimes the shots don't come through the way they'd like because they're anxious. They're developing maybe a little bit of anxiety. What are your thoughts here? We've now gotten a player to consistently break 90, and that next hurdle for them is to obviously break 80. That's sort of the next beast in the bag that they're trying to accomplish. What are your thoughts here generally? And then do you have some tips that you would recommend for those that have now become a little bit more accomplished in their game that want to take it to that next level? What are your thoughts?
Well, in my opinion, the fastest way to break 80 is you have to look at three areas. You have to look at driving, you have to look at your wedge game, and you have to look at putting. And if you're driving the ball, 220 yards off the tee, that puts a lot of pressure on you to be able to break 80. That's going to be tough to do. You've got to really have a fantastic short game. So you may need more distance. That could be equipment. That could be working on your grip so that you're not, losing distance with maybe you have a weak grip and your ball is fading off to the right and you're losing 15 or 20 yards. Maybe you don't have the right shaft in your driver. So that would be one of the things I would recommend, making sure that you have a driver. And if you're going to invest any money in your equipment, the driver is where you need to start first, because you've got to have something that you can get out there. The second thing is the wedges. You need to have good wedges. If you're going to break 80, you're going to need to have, in my opinion, I think it's important to have 4 wedges. You need to have a pitching wedge, obviously, some sort of gap wedge, sand wedge, and a lob wedge, because I think it's important that you be able to handle all the shots inside of 100 yards. I never want a student to say to me, I don't have a club for this yardage, and I'm saying to them, you're 75 yards from the green, you don't have a club. No, I can't hit my lob wedge that far, and my sand wedge, goes too far, whatever is the situation. So, or maybe they don't have their wedges gapped properly. They have a gap wedge and they have a lob wedge, but they don't carry a sand wedge. So that I see that situation quite a bit. And then obviously you're putting. I was always taught a 3-putt is a 1-shot penalty. So if if somebody came to me and said, John, I had, I shot 85 and I had, 5 3-putts, that's like hitting 5 balls into the water. And if you hit 5 balls in the water, you should go to the driving range and work on your swing or take a lesson. But if you have 5 3-putts, you need to go to the practice green. You need to work on your putting, getting your speed down. And the last thing, talking about mindset, I heard this from, it was either Tom Watson or Tom Kite, and they made the comment that they allowed themselves 1 double bogey per round. And anytime they made a double bogey, they just would say to themselves, and you think about this, this is some of the best players in the world. They had the mindset, well, I know that I'll make 2 birdies. Well, if you're trying to break 80, you need to understand you're going to have a couple of bad holes. If you have 1 bad hole aside, if you say to yourself, I'll allow myself 1 bad hole aside, all of a sudden it takes the pressure off so that when you get on the 4th or 5th hole and you have a little bit of a train wreck where the wheels fall off, you don't just panic and you don't go into, this is going to happen the rest of the day, I'm done now. You say to yourself, there's my bad hole. I got rid of that one. Now I've got 3 or 4 more holes left. Let's finish up strong. And then you have that bad hole that you kind of have in your back pocket for the back 9. Now, this is not something that is a swing tip or anything along those lines. It's a mindset that sometimes bad scores are going to happen. And when they do, you just say, I was prepared for that. That was it. I knew that, every now and then that's going to happen. It's not the end of the world. And I still have a lot of holes to make up for it, because if you're going to break 80, you are going to have to make some birdies. So you say to yourself, I had a double bogey on the 4th hole. I've got a lot of holes left. I can make 1 or 2 birdies over those holes, and I'll make up for that double bogey. So I think that those are the types of things that I would look at to get to where you're shooting consistently in the 70s. But driving the ball, wedges, and putting is a must.
Yeah, and the key word really is, guys, is consistent, being consistent in what you're doing. And, one of the things that we see with a lot of our high handicap golfers is a lot of inconsistency. And it's not so much in hitting the specific shots, it's actually from round to round. I'll give you an example, finally they've broken 100 this week, but then next week they're shooting 114. And then the week after that, maybe they've broken 100 again, and it's back and forth, or there's a lot of inconsistency in their game. And they're unable, for the most part, to really identify the weak areas. I mean, yes, they understand maybe they need to spruce up their putting a little bit, and they do that, but they really lack the ability to have the foresight to see where it is they're going wrong. And this is why, and it's not just about lining our pockets. This is the reason why we recommend that you go and get lessons from a qualified professional, because they're not only going to be able to help you with specific areas of your game, but they're also trained what to look for, what to see, and they can identify key areas in your game that you're struggling with. And I think the other thing, too, and I'm sure you probably both agree, it's one thing, we certainly have to go to the practice tee and practice green and work on these things, but more importantly, I think we need to get practice out on the golf course. So when we're with our instructors, we need to make sure that they're taking us out on the golf course and working on these different areas that we're struggling with in a practice lesson, or playing lesson rather, than just going to the range and hitting balls. Because until you actually put it into practice and actually see how things are going to perform on the golf course, it's very difficult for them to take that game that they've been working on the practice tee out on the golf course if they haven't been out there enough. Final thoughts on breaking 90 or breaking 80? Jamie, I'm going to start with you, and then John, and then we'll wrap things up.
This has just been a really fun discussion. I could keep going here. This is really fun. I love what John said about a 3-shot is a 1-shot penalty. 3-putt is a 1-shot penalty. Really true. Mm-hmm. I'm also reminded of hearing Dave Pell's talk. This was 10 years ago or more at the PGA show. And he was talking about looking through tour players' scorecards. And they noticed that it was kind of a serendipitous finding that there tends to be, even with the pros, a blow-up hole or two even. And, so being able to as John was talking about, either kind of account for that, sort of expect it in a certain way, and not fall apart around it, just go, okay, that one happened, and then, the worst has happened, let it go. I actually remember when I played my PAT, those player aptitude tests to get in the LPGA, the very first hole I double bogeyed. I was like, oh my God, I'm 2 over after 1 hole. And I walked in the second tee, I said to myself, you know what, the worst has happened. And I was, I think I played 1 over the rest of that round. Played just fine. It was like, let that go and know what's happened. But, it's kind of managing those blow-up holes. I remember once seeing Lorena Ochoa when she was world number 1 on the LPGA Tour. She took an 8 on the very first hole on Thursday, and she ended up winning the tournament with a record something like 24 under. So, you can come back, and we need to know that. I think that, again, I always emphasize consistency and accuracy are very, very important. So many people focus on distance, and you need a certain amount of distance, no question about it. But consistency and accuracy, those come back to these principles about center, balance, practicing, grooving your swing so that you know what you're doing, and that goes to your point about taking lessons. I think that another area we haven't talked about, and I've had a lot of fun teaching, 2-3 day golf schools, is trouble shots, whole golf schools on trouble shots. So that, you know what to do when you're kind of got to hit a low shot under a tree, or even sand shots, fairway bunkers, screen side bunkers. Those are trouble shots for people. And so, having some kind of an ability to deal with that, when you've got a bad lie is a trouble shot often, or your ball's right up against the long grass off the fringe of the green. And it's like, well, what do you do? How do you play that? So I think that people need some more ability in breaking 80, for sure, breaking 90, to have some confidence and some experience and some teaching to play trouble shots. And that also helps to minimize or to work with disaster management and minimize those blow-up holes. So those are, some thoughts, I think. It's a really, and again, just can't emphasize practice enough and learning to enjoy practicing. I know I used to hate practicing until I became a martial artist and I appreciated what that was about. And then when I realized, oh my God, there are so many fun ways to practice in golf. Absolutely on, at home, on the driving range, putting green, so many ways you can create games and challenges for yourself. And I also agree with you and always love to get out on the golf course with my students. I think that playing lessons are essential.
Yeah, I agree 100%, and some great final thoughts. John, what about you? I mean, we're trying to help people get over some barriers here tonight, and we've given them, I think, some sound advice and for some things for certainly to think about. What are your final closing thoughts as far as helping them to get over that hurdle of breaking 90 and even a little bit further breaking 80? What are your final thoughts here?
Well, one of the things that I recommend to all my students is that they keep their stats. That is very important in breaking these barriers, because sometimes we look at our golf games with, I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say, oh, I have a really good short game, or I'm a good putter, and then I'll go out with them on the golf course, and I think to myself, you're really not a good putter. You really don't have a good short game. You're not nearly as good as you could be. So the only way that you can really have these eye-opening moments, these aha moments that we all are looking for, is through keeping your stats. And the first thing that you need to do is just go after you're done. Don't worry about doing this during the round, but after the round is over, just see how many fairways you hit. If you hit it in the fairway, you give yourself a check, even if it only went 100 yards. If it's in the fairway, it's in the fairway. If it's in the rough, it's not a fairways hit. Then you look at your greens in regulation. Now, if you're trying to break 90, put your greens in regulation on a par 3 at 2 shots, on a par 4 in 3 shots, and a par 5 in 4 shots. If you're trying to break, if you're shooting in the 80s and trying to break 80, obviously you need to do it the way that the tour players do it. Look at your greens in regulation, see how many up and down do your up and down percentage, and I always try to get students to have a goal of 50%. So if you miss the green in regulation, if you can get up and down 50% of the time, that's a good start. And then count your putts. And like I said, a 3-putt is a one-shot penalty. My number one goal, anytime I tee it up, my number one goal is not to 3-putt. My number one goal, because I don't care how poorly I'm playing, if I'm a good putter, I can still roll the ball up there. I can still manage and get the best score possible by being a good putter. If the average golfer would take 5 minutes after their round and just sit down and do that, you would start seeing, wow, I only hit one fairway in 9 holes, or wow, I had 42 putts or something like that. You start realizing where you need to put your practice time. And I look at the scorecard like I do my bank account. If I see money going out in an area and it's going out really fast, I pay attention to that. Well, you have to think of your shots like money. And so if you look at your shots and say, wow, I've got a lot of putts, I guarantee you if it was really real money, you would go get a putting lesson. And I would encourage you, whatever your weakest point is, to either, number one, I would suggest that you go to your local PGA or LPGA golf professional and you get a lesson in that area. So you go to them and say, the other day I played and I had a lot of putts and I want to work on that. And if you're not going to do the lesson, then at least put your practice time. But if you organize what practice time you have towards your weaknesses and not your strengths, don't go out there and just work on what you like to do. I see our guys who can hit the driver a mile, but they can't score. Don't work on your driver. Go work on your short game. And if you do that, that's how you lower your scores. It's not by it's treating your golf game like it's a business. And if you treat it like it's a business, you can't help but get better.
Yeah, add some excellent points as well to wrap things up. And you're exactly right. You want to warm up with some of your better shots for sure. You want to keep those tuned up. You don't want them falling by the wayside. But again, you're exactly right. We see too many golfers going out there spending the majority of their time on areas of the game that they're already very proficient at, and not really focusing on the areas that they're not so good at. And a lot of it is, again, it's an anxiety, I think, that develops there. As both you and Jamie have alluded to, is you want to make it fun. Make it enjoyable, make some, think up some different games and scenarios. And if you're not sure, there's lots of things you can go online, lots of ways. Or if you're working with your local golf professional, they can help you put together some fun ways of making your practice a little bit more enjoyable. Guys did a great job. I think it was an interesting discussion, and hopefully the folks tuning in tonight will have had a better understanding of what they need to do, or some ideas anyways, of breaking 90 and even taking it further and breaking 80. As always, I'm going to give each of you a chance to just let the folks know if they want to reach out, the best way to do that. So, John, I'm going to go with you, and then Jamie.
Well, once again, Ted, thank you for having us on the show and giving us this platform. And Jamie, as always, I enjoyed being on the show tonight with you. For the listeners out there, if you want to reach me on social media, you can go under John Decker Golf Instruction, and I spell my first name Jon, so John Decker Golf Instruction. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or LinkedIn. As you mentioned earlier, I'm a senior editor with Golf Tips Magazine, so I have instructional articles coming out with the magazine as well as my faith-based article, Fairways to Heaven. And for all the listeners out there, I really recommend that you subscribe to the magazine, and it's a great magazine. And Ted, you've done a fantastic job with it. If you're interested in my book is titled Golf is My Life, Glorifying God Through the Game. You can get it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Walmart.com. If you're interested, I've had several people who have contacted me about getting autographed copies. You can reach out to me on social media, and I'll be glad to do that as well. And I also, now that we're post-COVID, I'm doing back to public speaking. And in fact, I just did a speaking engagement last week in Springfield, Ohio. But I can come to your venue. I can do golf instruction, and I can speak to the group as well. So if you're interested in that, please reach out. But once again, thanks again, Ted and Jamie, and I hope you guys both have a great weekend.
All right, thank you as always, John. Jamie, what about you? Best way that they can reach you Yeah,
well, best way to reach me is through my website, which is thecenteredway.com. It's centered, thecenteredway.com, or kiaigolf.com, kiaigolf.com. Takes you to the same place, and that is really easy to do. And also, while I'm here in Israel, I'm doing a lot of work on Zoom, as you can imagine. So doing a lot of virtual teaching and speaking, even corporate speaking. I do a lot of peak performance work and working with stress, working with developing that sense of center, balance, ground, mental clarity, mental focus, self-mastery to master what we're doing here on the golf course. And golfers at every level. So it's really been fun doing virtual lessons and to be able to work with people from here. So, right now my phone isn't working from the States. If anybody's got WhatsApp, it's +1-760-492-4653. So, I really am very much enjoying staying connected over here. Appreciate being on the show. This is a tremendous discussion, and I think it's so important, everything that we've talked about today, for people to reach their next goals. And I think it's applicable at every level. So thank you very much for that opportunity. And, I really do look forward to hearing from people. Other I should just mention would be email. So Jamie, Jamie, @kiaigolf.com, kiaigolf.com.
Perfect. Jamie, thank you. John as well for joining me this evening on a great discussion on Coach's Corner. Go get some rest, Jamie. I know it's wee hours of the morning for you over there. Thank you both very, very much, and I look forward to you joining me again next time here on the Coach's Corner panel on Golf Talk Live. Have a great weekend, guys.
Thank you, Ted.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. We will be joined by our very special guest, Wes Whittingham, here in just a moment, and we're going to take a quick message break, and then we'll be right back with our special guest.
This edition of Golf Talk Live is brought to you by Golf Pal, the best place to find only the finest in golf training aids and accessories. Get in on some great deals on leading products such as Down Under Board, Rapsodo, Golf Slingshot, and more. Visit golfpal.golf today. And don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter. Golf Pal. We're serious about your game.
The following ad is sponsored by Golf Tips Magazine.
Are you tired of being short off the tee? And what about those 3 putts? Forget about it. It's time you got serious about your game. Golf Tips, the most in-depth magazine in the industry. For over 30 years, Golf Tips has delivered expert content such as the latest golf instruction from America's top pros, simple to follow practice and game improvement drills, fitness and mental game tips, equipment, training aids, accessory and apparel reviews, golf destinations and travel tips for every budget, and so much more. Don't miss a single issue. Go to golftipsmag.com and subscribe today.
All right. Once again, thank you, everybody, for joining me tonight on Golf Talk Live. I'm very, very excited to have this gentleman back on. He was on a little earlier in the year. We had a great discussion then, and I know we're going to have a great discussion tonight. Of course, I'm talking about Wes Whittingham. He is the Vice President of Sales for Volvik USA. Wes's career includes 40 years in the golf industry in the on-course and off-course retail, OEM, and overseas manufacturing arenas. He has product category experience in footwear, apparel, clubs, balls, and accessories. He has been senior management positions with Ram Golf, Head Sports, Olimar, Florsheim, Bridgestone Golf, and, of course, Volvik USA. Resides in Atlanta, Georgia, holds a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in organizational management. So please welcome back my very special guest, Wes Whittingham from Volvik USA. Good evening, Wes. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Ted. I appreciate you having me on.
Well, I'm glad to have you come back. It's always nice chatting with you, and we're going to talk about a number of different things here tonight. So I've already told everybody a little bit about yourself, but one thing I want to do just for some of the new listeners, I asked you this question last time. I'm going to start off with this one again. Is just talk about a little bit how you got into golf, because it's always interesting to hear everybody's journey on how they got into golf. Many, of course, at a very early age. And what was your appeal, and when did you first sort of get interested in the game?
Sure. Well, I owe it all to an uncle way back when. I was like a lot of kids back in my era that played team sports. So I was football, wrestling, baseball, basketball, you name it. I've played in all those types of things. And my uncle played some golf. I caddied for him a couple of times. And he took me out to the driving range and got me hooked. It was, because it was one of those unique aspects where, I think it's the same for a lot of your listeners. The first time you hit a flush shot and it goes straight and you want to do it again and you can't. And then you just, you keep trying and working at it. And that's how I got hooked on golf. And so my mom got me some lessons, and, I had the proverbial Spalding starter set in a box.
Yep.
And went out and got lessons, and then I really didn't play all that much, but what happened was that Ted, I was lousy at baseball, and so wrestling season had just ended. It was my first year of high school, so I had played football, played wrestling. I was looking for a spring sport. Probably one of my closest friends, he and I were talking, and I said, so what are you going to do this spring? He's like, I'm going to go out for the golf team. I'm like, you're going to go out? You're not going to go out for baseball? I said, no, I'm going to go out for the golf team. And so it was just a simple, so what do they do? Do they have to lift weights? Do they have to run? Is there anything associated to physical activity, like football and wrestling? He says, no, I don't think so. He says, I think all you got to do is just go out and play golf. I'm like, sign me up. And so I went out for the freshman golf team with my buddy. We made the JV squad, and ultimately I played all through high school and then into college. And after that, continued to play in some amateur events, et cetera, and have loved the game ever since.
It's interesting. There's so many people that share very similar story to yours, and that's why I like to ask it, because everybody's journey has been different. And as you pointed out, the one really interesting thing about this game is no matter what level you're at, whether you're a beginner or whether you're a seasoned player, when you hit that well-struck shot, there's no better feeling. It's almost like a euphoria, and especially obviously for the beginning golfers, that sort of it's like planting a seed, and watching it grow. And it's almost impossible. I've seen some players over the years, some beginning golfers that are just atrocious. And you'd think that, they're going to drive the golf cart into the pond. They're throwing the clubs in the pond. They never want to see that game again. Right. And you get them out in the practice tee, and they'll hit that one beautiful shot that just seems to go forever. And it's like, okay, let's go play again. And it's just, I've never, right?
Well,
go
right,
ahead.
Exactly. But, how about for the seasoned player, you could go out and you could have absolutely one of the worst rounds of your life, but how many of us, and right now, I guarantee you that everybody that's listening to your show is raising their hand when I say this next line, and that is, somehow miraculously you hit your best drive of the day on the 18th hole. And it's just like you automatically forget about all the slices off into the trees or the duck hooks or whatever, and you just remember that, flush drive right down the middle of the 18th fairway, or maybe knocking in that 20-foot curler on the last green, and you're just like, when are we teeing it up again? But that's the beauty of the game, and that's what drives people back. And I'm a guy who's played the game, and somebody asked me this the other day, how long have you been playing golf? And I actually had to stop and think for a second. At first I was going to say, I've probably played 35, 40 years, and then all of a sudden it dawned on me, I've played over 50 years of playing the game. But I'm getting lessons right now from a great young golf professional locally, and he and I were talking, and I said, so where do you focus on? You focus with seasoned players, lower handicap players, juniors? I mean, what do you enjoy as a teacher? And he was saying, well, I love working basically with everybody, and I said, I've got to think for you, teaching professional, the most difficult thing is getting a new student to hit that first flush shot with whatever it is. And he hands down agreed. He said, listen, and he said, the euphoria after they do that, where they're facing the target and they're just like looking at the ball, up in the air. He said it's like wonderment in their eyes after they hit that shot. So it's a cool thing, and you're absolutely 100% correct. That's what really drives everybody back to the golf course or back to the range, and that's when you really know you get hooked.
It's funny that you mention that because, one of the interesting things, when as a teacher professional, a lot of times, of course, you get out on the course with playing lessons, but you're also obviously spend a lot of time on the practice range and so forth. And, you'll see somebody out on the golf course that is just having a horrendous round of golf. Every hole you see them at, they're just struggling. And you get back to the clubhouse and you're, having a drink or you're having a bite to eat. And the one thing that player that you've witnessed for the last, couple of hours out in the golf course will be talking about, like you said, is that one well-struck shot or that putt that curled in, 20, 30, 40 feet, and that's all they're talking about. Now, obviously not everybody does that, but they're talking about that, and it's just in the passion, and you're thinking to yourself, man, I just watched you for 2.5 hours, struggling in the heat and having a terrible round. But, you got to give credit to them because for somebody like that, because even though they've had a horrific round, they're focusing on the positives of that round. And that's really key, I think, for as a golf instructor, is to get your students to really focus on the positive parts of their game and not dwell on the negative parts of their game. And I always equate this to going to the airport. When I see students coming in and they're sort of slumped over and they're dragging, it's like dragging your baggage to the airport. It's like, you leave your baggage, you check it in, and then you go and wait for your flight. No, there's some people that'll drag it all the way around. They drag it to every hole, to every shot they go, and it's every bad shot they hit for the last, 5 rounds or the last, couple of hours or what have you, or the last, 2 or 3 holes that they didn't play very well. And it's hard to get them to unload that baggage. So it's nice to hear, even when somebody's had a bad round, them talking about the good shots that they hit. So very interesting, and thank you for sharing some of your journey as well. All right, so let's talk about Volvik. I know we've touched on a lot of things the last time, but before we get into what's new and what's coming up, Volvik obviously is known for a couple of things. It's not just known for colored balls. You guys have some great product out there, but also for the performance and quality throughout the variety of their products. What goes into developing a product that has helped you guys be able to achieve those various things?
That's a great question, Ted. And I'll tell you what, it's the behind-the-scenes effort of the engineers that really is what creates the stake behind the sizzle. Everybody loves to talk about the sizzle, packaging, the colors, everything else, but, a color golf ball, whether it's a matte finish or glossy finish or whatever the product might be, simply won't sell if it doesn't perform. Every product has to perform. We all know that. And, it's the engineers in the background that are, in development, sometimes for 2, 3, 4 years, and they're tweaking existing patents or designs, or they're creating a completely new material from scratch, things of that nature. And so, before any of our products go to market, we do a tremendous amount of testing. There's a lot of scrutiny, of course, with, in the golf ball side. There is in every product category, but just within the framework of golf balls, the United States Golf Association, God bless them, puts a governor on all golf ball manufacturers, right? And so, there's a very specific velocity that a ball can go over a fixed period distance-wise. And if it exceeds that, then it's deemed non-conforming. And if it's non-conforming, then it's a golf ball that, typically we're not going to take to market. But if we did take it to market, like our Magma golf ball, which is a little bit smaller, a little bit heavier than the USGA conforming, we have to note it or denote it as such on the packaging itself. But, besides the Magma product, which we intentionally put out there as a distance product, as a non-conforming distance product, all of our other products are conforming. And, so really what it comes down to with golf balls today is aerodynamically, how long can you keep a golf ball in the air and how straight the ball will go, because the straighter a golf ball goes and the longer it's in the air, the farther it will go. And so those are really the two key principles at the end of the day. If you want to just distill it down to that, that's really what creates or amplifies where we want to take a golf ball, is to make sure that we can keep it in the air as long as we possibly can and to keep it as straight as possible while still making a conforming product. And so, whether it's a 4-piece golf ball, a 3-piece golf ball, 2-piece golf ball, whatever the number of layers is, that testing, that criteria, the materials that are put into it, really the final output or the final equation, that's what we want to achieve.
So let me ask you, let's go back, and we're not going to go back to the beginning of time because that we don't have enough time here to do that. But, I remember, and as I'm sure you do, early on in our golfing life, we had the Balata balls. And,
right.
Then things started to progress. And I remember, seeing some of the old golf balls, and if you peeled off the cover, if you had one that had a slice or a nick in it and you pulled it apart,
sure.
you had this rubber band that was wrapped around this little
right.
ball. That's not like that anymore, obviously. There's a lot of different other technology. So, you mentioned, whether it has 3 or 4 layers. Maybe talk, you don't have to get into specifics because I know there's maybe some trade secrets and whatnot that you don't want to dispill. But,
sure.
But talk about really what changes have been made in the golf ball from that early time, again, to where we are today. Why is there so many layers in the ball? And maybe you can talk a little bit about what some of the layers do, what their function is.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we see on the marketplace today everything from a 2-piece golf ball to a 5-layer golf ball. TaylorMade, for example, has a product out that's a 5-layer golf ball. We make a series of products in our urethane line called the Tour S4 and the Tour S3. The S4 obviously is a 4-layer golf ball. The S3 is a 3-layer golf ball. All of our I'm just going to call it the number one matte finish golf ball in the world right now, the Vivid, is a 3-piece golf ball. And typically what happens, most manufacturers, of course, have gotten away from Balata and gone to urethane. The other material, the other common outer layer material or cover material that's made is Surlyn or ionomer Surlyn. And so what happens with these layers is the first thing you start with is the engine of the golf ball. And, the Hemi, so to speak, is the core. And so around the core, typically manufacturers will create a thin mantle layer. And then after that, they may add another thinner mantle layer and then ultimately the cover. But the core, when we go back to the engine, that's really what creates the velocity, if you will, of the golf ball. That's what deforms at impact, especially with a driver, because typically people will swing a driver with the highest amount of club head speed and create the greatest amount of deformation of a golf ball. So the ball will actually become somewhat egg-shaped. And even though when you tee it up and when you go out, hopefully into the fairway, and you are preparing to hit your second shot, it'll look perfectly round, and you'll never know that ball actually deformed into an egg shape. But that's exactly what happens at impact. And quite frankly, the more you can deform it, of course, to a specific amount, when the ball comes back to round, to its original shape, that's where you achieve maximum ball velocity. So every type of player, male, female, junior, senior, whether it's a club head speed of 60 miles per hour or a club head speed of 120 miles per hour, achieves some level, of deformation and creates some level of ball velocity. And so, again, the core is the engine. The mantle layers typically will create a benefit to the player in the form of either reducing the amount of spin, for example, and typically that's in side spin. And also it is another layer that acts as kind of a part of the energy driven behind the golf ball. Now, the cover material that we select, or the player selects, more importantly, if they want to get fit for a golf ball, if they select a urethane golf ball, urethane will spin more than a Surlyn-covered golf ball. And the reason why urethane spins more is just the type of material itself. And, it's kind of funny. The thinner you make a cover, the softer the ball will feel. Obviously to a certain extent. We can't thin it down to like paper, but ultimately the thinner the cover, the softer the ball will feel. The other thing is that urethane balls will spin more and have a softer feel and a slightly different sound than Surlyn. So when you're out on the putting green, and if you put down some urethane golf balls next to some Surlyn-covered golf balls, they could both be, for example, 3-piece golf balls. But the Surlyn golf ball is going to sound differently than the urethane ball. And so where does spin become your friend? Spin becomes your friend, especially for mid to low handicappers around the green. They're going to be able to control their approach shots into the green more precisely. They'll have minimal dispersion in terms of that shot going into the green and then hitting and stopping. Whereas Surlyn, because of the material itself, doesn't spin quite as much, and so there isn't the same level of stopping power. And you're going to have players that, especially mid to low handicap players, that can definitely see a significant benefit playing a urethane cover versus a Surlyn cover. Players that are mid to higher handicap players or with less skill sets of some of these better players, they're not going to notice really any difference at all in terms of the feel or perhaps even the spin. But everybody, I guarantee you, if they're out on the putting green and they're practicing with Surlyn and urethane side by side, they'll definitely hear and feel a little bit a difference between those two cover materials. But typically what we're seeing is that, whether they're the LPGA players that are playing right now in the AIG Women's Open Championship in Scotland at Carnoustie, or whether it's a PGA Tour player right now that's playing in the FedEx out in New Jersey, all those players, I guarantee you, are playing some level of a urethane covered product, so they have that precise control, especially going into their shots into the greens and chipping and putting around the greens.
It's interesting, when you explain the differences between the types of balls and how they react, and obviously the level of player, that can take advantage of the differences. A lot of people say, well, why is there so many different golf balls? Well, each of them, obviously there's a number of reasons, but primarily there's how they perform under certain circumstances and conditions, and obviously the level of play or player can dictate. And that's so it brings me to a question, and the fact that you mentioned about over in Europe as an example. Typically, depending on the time of the year, it tends to be a little bit cooler than what we might have here in sunny Florida. The climate becomes involved. So talk about a little bit about that. If you're playing in a warmer climate, let's say like Florida in the summer where it's, 90, 100 plus,
sure.
What ball you play is also going to be a factor as well, correct?
No doubt, and what people will notice, especially like in climates where the humidity may be a little bit higher. And so, I live in Georgia, and certainly, we've had that same type of scenario where we get a lot of rain and it heats up during the day. And so you would think, okay, a person just kind of logically thinking would say, okay, when it's humid out and there's really not much wind, the ball's probably not going to go anywhere because, the air just feels heavy, right? And when it's a little cooler, like if it's in the 60s or perhaps low 70s and it's crisper out, I bet the ball will go farther then. And like everything else in golf, whatever you think logically, if you peel around 180 degrees and go the opposite direction, that's the right way with the game of golf. So because of the energy that is in the air, okay, especially under humid conditions and when it's hot, that's when a ball performs at its peak, and that's when the ball's actually going to stay in the air longer. You're going to hit it farther, and that's where all players will achieve probably their longest tee shots. They'll probably be hitting it, maybe a half a club longer with some of their iron shots, things of that nature. But they're going to see the ball definitely fly farther because it's warm, there's a lot of energy in the air, and that energy creates more lift, okay, with the golf ball. Conversely, when it's cool, typically what's going to happen is that the ball's not going to stay in the air as long. There's not as much energy maintaining the aerodynamics of the ball. There's not as much lift. And so the ball is going to, I don't want to say fall out of the sky, but it's just not going to stay in the air as long. Spin, remember, a lot of times that four-letter word gets kind of a bad rap at golf, because everybody talks about high launch, low spin, right, off the driver. But for a lot of players, you want spin, okay? You don't want to go out and just hit a golf ball with no spin because it's not going to go anywhere. What you want is, even these tour players that are hitting at 350 yards, typically they're going to spin it around 2,600 RPM, okay? And that's really kind of a baseline for most of these guys. And so, that's what you really want to achieve in terms of the differences and how climate affects the performance of a golf ball.
Well, and also even elevation.
To that point,
sorry, go ahead.
You took the words right out of my mouth because that's exactly. I used to live in Colorado, and I'll never forget. One of the very first things I learned when I lived in Colorado was the longer it's in the air, the farther it's going to go. And so typically people, I grew up in Chicago, and the typical loft on a driver might be 9.5 degrees, and it was just everything was parkland. We were at relatively low elevations. I move out to Colorado. Everybody's hitting a 12-degree driver. They're launching it up into the sky. It's hanging out there forever. And, again, the longer it's in the air, the farther it's going to go. So elevation absolutely has an impact on how a golf ball performs.
So let's leave the pros aside for a second, and let's talk about our amateur golfers, because this is where a lot of them get confused. I know you've mentioned a lot of the factors and a lot of the things that they do, but when we always hear about, well, you need to get fitted for the proper clubs and so on and so forth, but you really need to get fitted for a golf ball too. So for a high handicapper, let's say we'll take a 20 or 25 plus handicap. They don't need to be playing a tour quality ball or something along that line. How do they get fitted for something? What are the things that they should be looking for?
Sure. So, I think the very first thing that people have to address is, what are their expectations in terms of what they want to achieve out on the golf course. So, if you're that 20, 25 handicapper, typically most players want something that's durable, something that they can find or they can hit relatively straight, and that they can reasonably get it up in the air pretty consistently. So, number one, I think one of the criteria that most players really don't think about when they're purchasing golf balls, but it is, again, a keynote behind Volvik, and that is the visual. How well do you see the golf ball that you're playing? Obviously, you're going to see a color golf ball better than you will see a white golf ball. That's a fact. The second thing is, you really want to decide, okay, do I want a two-piece golf ball? Do I want a three-piece golf ball? And really, for a higher handicap player, you can certainly play a two-piece golf ball. There's a lot of great two-piece products out there that have oversized cores, a Surlyn or an ionomer cover. They come in a multitude of different colors and finishes these days. And typically, they have price ranges anywhere from $20 to $25 a dozen. And the benefit is that two-piece golf balls simply don't spin as much as their three-piece counterpart. They don't feel quite as good as the three-piece counterpart. They're built typically, all two-piece golf balls are typically built as a distance product, and that's exactly what they produce or provide to the player. Whereas a three-piece product, if you're starting to see some encouraging signs with your game, and you want to move into perhaps a slightly different type of product, I would encourage everybody to take a really hard look at three-piece Surlyn or ionomer products. There's a ton of them out there. Of course, our Vivid and Crystal products are both, they have multitudes of color options in both. The Vivid is a matte finish. The Crystal is a glossy finish. Pick a color that you are comfortable with, and that type of product is going to feel better for you. You're going to get some more control around the greens and shots into the green. And, so ultimately, those are, I think, the foundational steps that, players can take and look at when they're purchasing products. And those three-piece products typically are going to go anywhere from $25 to $35 in terms of price. So, what is it? It's, maybe somebody's paying $1 more per ball, something like that. But, over the course of playing 18 holes or whatever the benefit is, if you ask that guy at the end of the round how well he hit a certain shot, and part of the benefit was because he was playing a three-piece ball over a two-piece ball, he'll pay the extra money every single time for the benefit that was achieved because he went to, a slightly better product than, perhaps a two-piece product provides. But ultimately, I think that's where, again, from a foundation standpoint, a platform standpoint, that's really where people need to start from. When you're a more sophisticated player, that's where you really want to start looking at your club head speed with a driver. Typically, that's where you're going to measure it first. And then the other place that you really want to work with on a super premium golf ball would be around the greens and on the green itself putting. A lot of people get really dialed in because of the driver, but, at the end of the day, you're only using that maybe 14 times during a round. Whereas the putter is going to come out every single hole. And, even some of the best players in the world may only hit 11 or 12 greens in a round. So they're going to be grabbing a wedge and, using their short game skills perhaps a third of the time during a round. And let me tell you, if they can get that up and down 4 or 5 times during a round, it's the difference between making a cut and missing a cut. So there's a lot of things that go into going to that next level, with the urethane and the more sophisticated types of products.
Yeah, and this has been, I think, a lot of the confusion for so many golfers, and I thank you for explaining a lot of it here tonight, because this is an area, I see, people going into their local pro shop or store and just grabbing whatever they can get, and some are obviously a little more price conscious than others, and I get that, but they're not really taking a lot of time and looking and studying what they really specifically need to be playing with. And we see that obviously with equipment as well. We see a lot of people just buying stuff off the rack and they're not really properly fitted, and then they're not getting the optimum benefit. So I think it's important that people realize that, these are the tools that you're taking out onto the golf course. You're taking your clubs, of course, is first and foremost, but you're also taking the golf ball out there. And if you're not playing a ball that's well suited for your game, then you're not going to get the maximum benefits out of it. And so, this is why, taking a few extra minutes, speaking to somebody that really understands that aspect of it with your pro and so forth, is going to help you in the long run. Like you said, it's the difference between playing a 2-piece and a 3-piece. There's benefits for both, right? There's benefits for both, but they're different. So understanding your game and knowing what the areas that you need the most help with is going to help you in that ball selection as well. We mentioned the last time you guys collaborated with Disney, particularly their Marvel characters and golf balls, and that, of course, at that time, that was earlier in the year, has been wildly successful. Give us an update. What's new on that end, and what's coming out?
I'm so glad you asked. I tell you what, this is going to be one of the most exciting product launches in the fourth quarter of this year that I think we've ever had, at least in Volvik USA's history. And that's because we're building some real product critical mass around our licensing agreement with the Marvel characters in Disney. And what we're doing is we're going to be adding Marvel headwear, Marvel ultralight stand bags, travel covers, umbrellas, driver head covers. And so, there's just a lot of different product categories that we feel consumers are going to really enjoy seeing the Marvel Avenger character of their choice on some of these different product categories. And so we had a lot of fun putting it together. We think there's a great opportunity for us. Keep in mind, these guys never lose. So, it's not like my Chicago Bears or, the Chicago Cubs or any of those teams, where, once they get into June, in the Cubs case, they're in a sell-off situation. The Avengers, the Marvel Avengers are undefeated. And so what's great about it is that we've done a fantastic job, especially our designers in Korea have come up with some great designs on our second generation golf ball gift sets. And then in addition to that, we've made that same application of these characters to some really great high quality ultralight stand bags. And again, as I previously mentioned, headwear, the travel covers, the umbrellas, et cetera. And so we're getting ready to launch all these products in October. We're super excited about, of course, trying to get these products to market. We really wanted to hit third quarter, quite frankly. But, just the unfortunately, the shipping issues that I think are impacting all business categories coming into the West Coast these days has really kind of held things back. But we're excited about getting it out for holiday, and we really think it's going to be quite a bit of fun. And we're looking forward to getting those products to market.
Well, I know from visiting your website, over the last little while as I was preparing for tonight, and I got to look at obviously you have a great product line in general with Volvik, but particularly the Marvel stuff that's coming out is very, very unique and very, very different. You've got the Black Widow and the Punisher, which is just very, very, and especially coming out in the fall season. Is going to, just really put it over the top. But I'm excited for it. See, this is what I like about, when you see the industry, when you see leaders in the industry like Volvik and your team that really, sort of think forwardly in the game. We always hear the old famous buzzword, growing the game and finding ways of really reaching out to a new market. And, you and I talked about the last time, unfortunately, we've all been going through this pandemic for the last year and a half plus, and it's been very, very difficult for others. But golf has been one of those areas in many ways that really has, I don't want to use the word prospered, but actually has fared very well. And out of that, with not just the regular folks coming out and being able to play, but there's been a lot of new people coming to the game which have never played before. Doing what you guys are doing is really addressing a new market as well as the existing market, because people are looking for something different. And in golf, you've got a big, I'm, of course, in the baby boomer and whatnot range, but, you've got the millennials and you've got the Gen Zs coming up. They're looking for a different experience than what typically the country club experience. And so a company like Volvik has to be leading the charge, if you will, with innovative products and certainly, keeping the status quo at bay as well. But you've got to move forward. And I think you guys have really, to quote a baseball vernacular, hit a home run with this Marvel partnership, and I think it's going to do extremely well. And I can tell that you're obviously excited about it, as I'm sure the other team members at Volvik are.
No question about it, Ted. Now, and I'll say this, there's a lot of challenger brands in the golf industry, and the little challenger brands out there. To really compete, you're a basic requirement, a fundamental axiom for that type of business is that you have to be versatile, you have to be innovative, you have to be creative, and you have to be willing to take some risk. And sometimes you're gonna hit that home run, and sometimes you're not. But you have to try. You have to put yourself out there. You have to kind of go with your gut instinct sometimes, and that's what's fun about this business, and that's what's exciting about it, is that instinctively, perhaps because I've been in the industry for so long, I can look at some of these products and I just know it's going to be successful, and I'm fortunate because I've got two sons that both play. And a lot of times I'll just reach out to them and I'll say, hey, what do you think? And they're like, oh, Dad, that's unbelievable. This is cool. And as soon as I get that affirmation, it's like I know that, that gut instinct is right. But you have to have you have to balance that visceral and kind of combine it with, what's the data, what's the metrics, what can we successfully take to market, what is a good approach for, our brand may not necessarily be the correct approach for another brand. But certainly for Volvik to be successful, let's put it this way, we have to definitely check the box next to high performance. We have to check the box next to quality. We have to check the box next to innovation. And we definitely have to check the box next to things that are going to be slightly different and not just like what everybody else is doing. And I think that's really the key to, our not only our current success, but certainly our long-term success. And as you so aptly put it, and I think you're dead on, Ted, there's so many new players that have entered the game. There's so many fresh faces out there. We talked last time about all the box set wrappers that were stuffed into garbage cans at the golf course parking lots. With people literally going from their local retail store right out to the golf course and taking it to the practice tee or taking it to the course itself. There's a ton of new players, and they're excited about it, and they're having a lot of fun with it. And so, clearly we want to make sure that we identify with them, in addition to that core consumer, that player that's been out there playing for a while.
I think the real key to it, and you're exactly right, Wes, I think the real key to golf moving forward is appealing to, for a long, long time we had a certain generation, again, that baby boomer generation and before, that sort of remained the status quo for a long, long time. And, that was fine, certainly served the industry very well. But what I'm seeing now in the industry with the next generations coming up is, again, as you point out, wanting to take more risks. They're looking to be more innovative, and they're looking at, I look at some of even the outfits of some of the players coming out today, and even though it's in a different design, it's almost a throwback to this, to the 70s, where, these wild colors and outfits and things like that. Again, a more modern flair to it, but it's the same thing. The generations coming up now don't have a problem walking down the street looking a certain way, because it's all about the individuality. So markets and businesses like Volvik and others out there have to be willing to move along with them. Otherwise, they stagnate and they just fall by the wayside and, become a dinosaur and die out. So I like what really, and I'm really, really very excited, and I said this to you the last time, and I said it to you privately when we talked off air, I really like the direction that you guys have taken with your marketing and with the approach and with the product line, because it is very forward in our industry. And this is why I think you guys are, particularly, in all aspects, but with the women's market particularly, and the overseas market as well, have really, been able to tap in with a great amount of ease, because I think people recognize really what it is that you're trying to do, and that is to be different, is to be something that's different than what traditionally golf sees day in, day out. And I think that's why your products do extremely well. And obviously not taking away from the performance, but again, there has to be a visual component to it as well, because that's what people are looking at, that golf ball for 18 holes. And, it's exciting when you've got something that's got some color and got some technology behind it that's helping you to improve your game. Also has to be visually appealing, and you guys have hit it out of the park, as I said. And I'm excited to see how the Marvel product component to it goes that much further as well. So kudos to you and your team.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. And we're excited about the critical mass that we're building around this Marvel stable of products, and we're going to continue to expand that. And likewise, we're on the threshold of launching some exciting new products in the Volvik side of things. And really what we've become is almost two brands in one, right? So even though all the Marvel branded goods, or logoed goods, I should say, are Volvik branded products, it's almost as if we have a Marvel brand now with all these new exciting products and product categories covered with it. And then we have Volvik, and so we're entering a key period of time where we're once again getting ready to launch the 2022 product line. And so we'll be producing, a brand new series of urethane products that we're getting ready to launch, and that should be on store shelves in January. We're going to be launching a brand new Vivid. We're going to be launching a brand new Crystal. And so clearly we're excited about that. We're excited to see how the performance of these products are going to stack up, not only against the competition, but how the consumer receives them and the benefits they receive from playing our products. But we're looking forward to that. It's always fun for somebody in sales, selfishly, to launch new products. That's the fun part of our job, right? And so, there's a thrill behind getting the new products on the shelf, the new packaging. Talk about the new steak behind the sizzle, so to speak. And so we're going to have a lot of fun as we move into the new year. But, the last 12 months have been so interesting, especially for a veteran of the industry like myself, because of all the complexities of this pandemic. So, how we manage our business, how we've launched products, some of the things that have happened with the logistics piece of products coming from Asia, not just in golf, but across all industries. All these things have really been kind of a fascinating aspect of what we've had to go through. And, at the end of the day, the consumer that walks into their local retail or pro shop and is picking up a dozen golf balls or a new driver or, testing out a putter, they don't, that's buzz in the background, and they probably don't even, they may not even be aware of it at all, and nor should they. But, for somebody who's in the industry, we've gone through so many different changes over these last 12 months that have really been fascinating. And, we had this slow drip of declines in participation, decline in rounds played, and then boom, a pandemic hits. And in May of last year, it's like somebody shot 500,000 players out of a cannon and sprinkled them over golf courses all over the country. And rounds jumped to almost unheard of levels in terms of participation rates and rounds played. And the ensuing demand for product went right along with it. And as you know, last September, the industry had one of the biggest months that the industry's ever had in its history. So, it's again, as a veteran of the industry and just kind of looking at this over a 40-year period of time, I don't think I've ever witnessed the ups and downs like we have certainly over the last 12 months. And you know what? At the end of the day, it's been really rewarding.
Yeah, it has in so many levels and in so many areas of the golf industry, and I hope that they, really learn from this, and not just look at it as, okay, we've had a major bump in the industry overall, and let's ride the wave, and then when the wave, subsides a little bit, that we just sort of go back to the status quo. I think this has been an opportunity for the industry to say, you know what, we need to start moving in new directions and not just, cater to the typical everyday golfer. I mean, we certainly got to adhere to what they want as well, but I think we've got a new opportunity here to bring in new golfers and new clientele into the fold that have never been here before. And we want to make sure that there's something here for them. And that's why companies like Topgolf and some of these other areas that have catered more to the entertainment side of the business have done so well as, in addition to some of the traditional venues and so forth and companies. So there's a lot of opportunity here for everybody. You guys have certainly, I consider a leader in what you're doing and in your field of expertise. And I wish you guys much continued success, and hopefully, we can do some things moving forward to, work together and so forth. And I'm always happy, Wes, to have you on the program. And it's always interesting and exciting to hear what's going on. And I'm really, really looking forward to seeing what's coming out here, not as we just move into the later part of this year, but what comes out for 2022 as well. So keep me posted. You're welcome to come back. And just for those tuning into the show, if you want to check out some of the things that we were talking about tonight, you can go to volvik.com. That's their official website, and it's volvik.com. And all of the products and some of the different things that they're doing, you'll find some information on their website there. But Wes, as always, thank you very, very much for joining me tonight on Golf Talk Live. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to you coming back and spending some time with me again on a future show.
Ted, thanks so much for having me on. It was a lot of fun. Really appreciate it.
I appreciate it as well. Take care, my friend. I'll talk to you real soon, and have a great weekend.
You do the same. Thanks again. Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye. All right, that was Wes Whittingham, Vice President of Sales for Volvik USA. And again, you can go to volvik.com. You can check out a lot of their great products there, not just the golf balls, but some of the accessories that they have. And again, you can see what we were talking about as far as their collaboration with Marvel. You'll see some of the great products that are coming out this fall. On that note, thank you guys for tuning in again to another show. I hope you enjoyed it. And thank you particularly to John Decker and Jamie Leno-Zimron for joining me earlier on the Coach's Corner panel. I think we had a pretty good discussion tonight. Hopefully you guys learned something from it. And if you're tuning in a little bit later in the broadcast and you missed that, best way to go and catch tonight's broadcast and any of the previously aired ones is go to blogtalkradio.com/Golf Talk Live and just scroll down to the on-demand section. And tonight's show will be there front and center in just a few moments. But there's some other great episodes, too, that in case you've missed some earlier guests. So thanks again. Have a great weekend. God bless. And we'll see you next time right here on Golf Talk Live.
Thanks for joining us. We hope you enjoyed this week's broadcast of Golf Talk Live. We'd like to thank this week's Coach's Corner panel, and a special thank you to tonight's guest. Remember to join Ted every Thursday from 6 to 8 p.m. Central on Golf Talk Live. And be sure to follow Ted on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you're interested in being a guest on Golf Talk Live, send Ted an email at ted.golftalklive@gmail.com. This has been a production of the iGolf Sports Network.